In my research on how colors in art affect our emotions, I ran across something interesting and, to some extent, disturbing. My question was, what happens when you change or alter the colors of an original painting? I didn't add it to the final discussion, that's episode 4, How Does Color Make Us Happy, because it wasn't relevant. However, it is fascinating, so I wanted to make a video about it. Call it a side quest in our journey to understanding about art and happiness. But before we get to Picasso, a note about artistic derivation. Let me begin by saying that artists have always looked to earlier artworks for inspiration and have often reused images for their own purposes. Especially in modern contemporary art, artists have taken old master paintings and reworked them. This is a time-honored tradition and rarely looked down upon. However, when said artists produce images merely for commercial gain, they are often derided or just completely ignored by the greater art community. This is not to say that they are doing anything wrong. Thomas Kinkade was derided as a hack back in the 80s and 90s, but his work was immensely popular and very pretty. Take The Great Wave by Hokusai. Here's the original. And here's my own derivation using Van Gogh's Starry Night. Perfectly acceptable to combine these two images. In fact, The Great Wave is probably the most used, reused, and reworked artwork in modern history. Of all these items are available on Etsy, and I'm sure they're very popular. Do a Google search and you will find hundreds more, each version unique in its own way, while still using Hokusai's print as a base. This is fine because Hokusai, as far as we know, did not have some deep inner meaning associated with the image. It was just one of his series of views of Mount Fuji, pretty landscapes celebrating the great mountain in Japan. And Van Gogh's Starry Night was painted for the sheer pleasure of portraying an inspiring night sky. No harm, no foul on either of these. But now let's look at Picasso, specifically Guernica, probably his most famous painting. Guernica is a huge canvas, his largest, and the only large canvas he did purely in black and white, so it must mean something. As background, Guernica was a city in the Basque region of Spain. In 1937, during the Spanish Civil War, General Franco allowed the Nazi war machine to destroy the town with aerial bombs. It was a horrific act of war, but one that did not get as much media coverage as the Republican government would have liked. As a Spaniard himself, Picasso followed the events happening in Spain, even though he lived in Paris. When he was asked to do a painting for the Spanish Republican Pavilion at the Paris World Fair in 1937, he settled on Guernica as his subject. At first glance, it's difficult to understand what's happening in the painting. I remember seeing it when it was still in New York at the MoMA, but I was too young to understand it and barely gave it much thought. I wish I could go back and look at it again with the knowledge I have now. Looking closely from left to right, we see the bull representing Spain. Below it, a wailing woman with a dead child in her lap. To her right, a wounded horse screaming in pain. Below it, a dead soldier, arms outstretched, one hand holding a broken sword. Above the horse, a lamp shaped like an eye, and next to it, a hand holding another lamp, shedding even more light on the scene. A woman runs from this right side of the painting, and a person screams for help inside a burning building. On the surface, it's pretty obvious what this painting is about. Picasso wanted no ambiguity about that. But as for deeper meanings and symbols, Picasso lets the viewer figure those out. He did not like telling the viewer what they should see. Instead, he wanted them to come up with their own interpretation. I'm not going to talk much about the symbols here. There are any number of videos that will discuss that. Instead, my main question is, why is it in black and white? Surely Picasso knew that color would have been a much stronger, more emotional impact. Well, there are two theories, and I think they're both right. One is that he wanted it to read like a newspaper report, so people would associate it with something true and immediate that was happening right now. The other is that he wanted viewers to really have to look at it to figure out what was happening. He wanted to touch the intellect first, before it touched the heart. And it does. So this image is a horrific image of a wartime atrocity, a serious and brutal condemnation of the Nazi war machine and Franco's regime. After its exhibition in Paris, it went on an international tour, where it alerted people to what was happening in Spain. It was also part of a fundraising effort for the Republican freedom fighters. Unfortunately, Franco stayed in power, and Picasso stipulated that the painting could not return to Spain until General Franco was dead, so it remained in New York until 1981. Now let's go back to our time-honored tradition of reusing and reworking classic works of art. While thinking about color in art, I wondered how a powerful image like Guernica would be different if it were in color. It would certainly change its impact, but how would it change Picasso's original vision? It's not like he painted in black and white because he had no color. You can't just colorize Guernica like a turn-of-the-century newsreel, but some people just can't resist. This version, and all the others you're going to see, are available on Etsy. Of all of them, this one feels the most respectful in that it seeks to recreate the drama of the event it depicted. It's what I would have done had I colorized it myself as a purely intellectual experiment. It uses the same dramatic color palette that Caravaggio so often used in his most impactful works. I do like it, but what would Picasso say? I'm pretty sure he would not be pleased. The color palette on the next one is just someone coloring it in like a paint-by-numbers painting. There is perhaps some thought put into terms of what Picasso himself might have used, but he didn't. I'm pretty sure this one not only would have sent him to his lawyers, but it would have given him a heart attack first. This last one is interesting because it seems to be a reinventing of the painting, using completely new ideas of art that Picasso never would have seen. I love the colors popular in the vaporwave trend, and this image certainly makes good use of them. The impact is unique, and it's difficult to say what to think about it. I'm sure Picasso would not approve of it for this particular painting, but he might have experimented with this palette on something else. Now, don't get me wrong, I am not judging anyone on their artistic choices. I could honestly see myself enjoying this last version in my own living room. My only concern is that if you buy something like this, be aware of the significance of the original before you invite any art critics into your house. To be sure, none of these versions respect Picasso's original painting. As far as he was concerned, painting is not done to decorate apartments. It is an instrument of war. That makes it pretty clear how he would react to the use and reuse of his work in this manner. But I do have one more thought. Would artists have been as tempted to alter Guernica if it was already in color? I think not. Some may think they can improve on the original color, and some may just think they can sell it with color. I don't know. But I do know that colorful images, even those like the Great Wave and Starry Night, don't get as much color alterations as Guernica, mostly because you can really see how it alters the works in such a way that they lose their appeal. I did find another work that people love to alter. And not that there aren't a whole bunch of others one. But anyway, this is The Nighthawks by Edward Hopper. It is iconic, it is unique, and it is dramatic. It tells a story. Hopper said it's about loneliness, and we can see it in the composition, the subject, and the color. Most derivations focus on changing the people who populate the painting, and not the color or composition. But there are some that change the colors. So what happens when you do that? This. I honestly don't know why someone would digitally alter this image in this way, except to make it more visually appealing for those looking for something to hang over the couch. It's awful. Sorry, not sorry. This one, however, is bright and cheery and has absolutely no relation to the original aside from the composition. It is altered enough to make it a completely different painting, and I love the colors. I believe this one is available on Wayfair. So what is our takeaway? Well, 1, color matters. A lot. And 2, really think about artwork you're looking at. Decide what it means to you before making any decisions or coming to any conclusions. But that's just my advice. I hope you enjoyed this video as much as I enjoyed making it. If you did, please like and subscribe. Until next time.